Hey everyone, Pastor Wade here, and I'm here to read with you chapter 6 of the Hardy Boys, The Tower Treasure. Hope you've been up to date on what's going on, and even if you haven't, I hope you'll spend some time with me as we read chapter 6. It's entitled Anxious Waiting. The suspect, the Hardys learned, was out of prison on parole. His name was John Jackley, but he was known as Red Jackley because when caught before going to prison, he had been wearing a red wig. He lives right here in New York, and maybe he's back home by this time, Joe spoke up. Let's go see him. Just a minute, Mr. Hardy said, holding up his hand. I don't like to leave Mother alone so long. Besides, in this type of sleuthing, 3 detectives together are too noticeable to a crook. This Jackley may or may not be our man, but if he is, he's probably dangerous. I want you boys to take the evening plane home. I'll phone the house the minute the thief is in custody. All right, Dad, his sons chorused, though secretly disappointed that they had to leave. When they reached home, Frank and Joe learned that their mother had been working on the case from a completely different angle. Hers was the humanitarian side. I went to call on the Robinsons to try to bolster their spirits, she said. I told them about your trip to New York, and that seemed to cheer them a lot. Monday, I'm going to bake them a ham and a cake for you to take to them. Miss Robinson isn't well and can do little in the kitchen. That is swell of you, Frank said admiringly. I'll go. Joe told them he had a tennis match to play. I'll do the next errand, he promised. Monday, during a change of classes, Frank met Callie Shaw in the corridor. Hi, she said. What great problem is on Detective Hardy's mind? You look as if you've lost your best criminal. Frank grimaced. Maybe I have, he said. He told Callie that he had phoned home at noon confidently, expecting to hear that his father had reported the arrest of the real thief to the Applegate money and the exoneration of Mr. Robinson. But there was no word, Callie, and I'm worried Dad may be in danger. I don't blame you, she said. What do you think has happened? Well, you never can tell when you're dealing with criminals. Now, Frank, you're not trying to tell me your father would let himself get trapped, Callie said. No, I don't think he would, Callie. Maybe Dad hasn't returned because he still hasn't found the man he was looking for. Well, I certainly hope the thief is caught, said Callie. But Frank, nobody really believes Mr. Robinson did it. Nobody but Herd Applegate and the men who employ people. Until they find the man who did take the stuff, Mr. Robinson is out of a job. I'm going over to see the Robinsons soon. Where are they living? Frank gave Callie the address. Her eyes widened. Why, that's in one of the poorest sections of the city. Frank, I had no idea the Robinsons' plight was that bad. It is, and it'll be a lot worse unless Mr. Robinson gets work pretty soon. Slim's earnings aren't enough to take care of the whole family. Say, Callie, how about going over to the Robinsons with me after school? Mother's sending a ham and a cake. I would love to, Callie agreed. The two parted at the door of the algebra teacher's classroom. As soon as the last bell had rung, Frank and Callie left the building together. First, they stopped at the Shaw house to leave the girls' books. I think I'll take some fruit to the Robinsons, Callie said, and quickly filled a bag with oranges, bananas, and grapes. When the couple reached the Hardy home, Frank asked his mother if any messages had come. No, not yet, she answered. Frank said nothing to her about being concerned over his father as he tucked the ham under one arm and picked up the cake box. But after he and Callie reached the street, he again confided his concern to Callie. It does seem strange you haven't heard anything, she admitted. But don't forget the old saying, no news is good news, so don't worry. I'll take your advice, Frank agreed. No use worrying a sour look around for the Robinsons. Or when you're with me either, Callie said, tossing her head teasingly. Frank hailed an approaching bus bound for the section of the city in which the Robinsons lived. He and Callie climbed aboard. It was a long ride, and the streets became less attractive as they neared the outskirts of Bayport. It's a shame, that's what it is, declared Callie abruptly. The Robinsons were always accustomed to having everything so nice, and now they have to live here "Oh, I hope your father catches the man who committed that robbery, and soon." Her eyes flashed, and for a moment she looked so fierce that Frank laughed. "Oh, I suppose you'd like to be the judge and jury of his trial, huh?" "I'd give him 100 years in jail," Callie declared. When they came to the street where the Robinsons had moved, they found that it was an even poorer thoroughfare than they had expected. There were small houses badly in need of paint and repairs. Shabbily dressed children were playing in the roadway. At the far end of the street stood a small cottage that somehow contrived to look homelike in spite of the surroundings. The picket fence had been repaired and the yard had been cleaned up. "This is where they live," said Frank. And Callie smiled. "It's the neatest place on the whole street." Paula and Tessie answered their knock. The twins' faces lighted up with pleasure when they saw who the callers were. "Frank and Callie!" they exclaimed. "Come in." And we're going to leave you in suspense to see what happens when they come into the house. Until next week.